Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today it is finally time for us to review for you Splatoon 3 on the Nintendo Switch. This review was originally written by me, like all the previous Splatoon games. I had to do a hat trick. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. When the original Splatoon launched on the Wii U back in the space year 2015, it was pretty groundbreaking. Nintendo making an online shooter? It sounded like a recipe for confusion, but as they so often do, Nintendo took a formula that had been refined to the point of parody and decided that it would be fun to be able to swim in bullets. Then they made the bullets ink, and everything came together. Splatoon 2 took this bullet breaststroke formula after just a few years and souped it up for the Nintendo Switch. It was an upgrade in every sense, but now we're reaching the big number 3. So, what are we looking at here? The Halo 3 or Driver 3 of the Splatoon series? As soon as you boot up Splatoon 3, you'll be met with an instantly familiar experience. Hitting the ground to score points, swim in it to move faster, surprise, surprise, it's Splatoon again! What's striking though is for how familiar everything feels, it also feels almost unfathomably slick in comparison to its predecessors. Nothing's going to leap out at you from a mechanical standpoint, but almost every possible area where things could be fine-tuned has been addressed. When you load up the game now, you can simply ignore the news update telling you what maps you'll be playing on. The excellent Salmon Run mode is now accessible 24/7. You can join lobbies with friends and play turf or on the same team. You can play the single-player missions in practically any order that you like. More on that later. Whilst there is no one major inclusion that sets this apart from Splatoon 2, the veritable militia of minutiae that the developers have employed is simply staggering. Weapons feel more balanced, maps feel tighter yet more open, the Tenta missiles feel like they've finally been nerfed, the list is frankly endless, so let's break it down into a few chunks, and even then, we're not going to be able to cover absolutely everything. The single player has always felt somewhat of an afterthought in previous games. It's always a very welcome inclusion, but it's apparent that the lion's share of the focus was on multiplayer, which for a multiplayer game is probably for the best. Things improved notably with Splatoon 2's Octo expansion, and we're wiggling all 8 tentacles with glee when we say that Splatoon 3's single-player Return of the Mammalians is taking reams of notes from that excellent slice of DLC. More cutscenes, more variety in its mission structure, a simple but undeniably charming and engaging plot, it's just an all-round fun and more fleshed-out time. To give you an idea of how wild and wacky the missions can get, we jumped from a standard get-to-the-goal affair right into another that stripped us of all of our weaponry and forced us to simply jump over increasing numbers of shockwaves until a timer finally decided we'd done enough. You're almost always given a choice of weapon as well, with more outlandish choices netting you a slightly higher reward, so there's a good deal of replayability as well. But most importantly, your progress is gated only by the fluffy ooze that turns you into a mammal as soon as you touch it, and that's still not a joke. You can clear this goo by netting enough power eggs from missions to bolster your small fry little buddy's feeding capabilities. Lob him onto the appropriate bit of ooze and poof, it's gone in a flash of mammalian extinction. These can also hide some of the frankly insane number of collectibles to be found in the overworld. By no means are these at all necessary, but it's nice to have something productive to do outside of the missions themselves. We were able to reach the final island of the game before we'd even done half the missions on the first. The game doesn't strictly encourage this, but conversely, it also does absolutely nothing to stop you. It is a shame that thematically each island, whilst being distinct, doesn't have said theming reflected in its missions. Instead, you're simply whisked away to a mystery zone which could be anywhere. It's a minor nitpick in what is otherwise probably the strongest Splatoon single player to date, but a nitpick regardless. One gripe that we had with Splatoon 2's single player offering was the fact that all the upgrades you unlocked left you feeling overpowered as all hell towards the end, whereas Return of the Mammalians instead strips you down Metroid style, and upgrading merely brings you, as far as we can tell, up to your fighting fit online self that you were before you got mixed up in all this fuzzy business. The world you explore in single player feels much more more cohesive than before, and that sentiment can be extended to the entire game. We were thrilled at just how much has been done to eliminate menus in Splatoon 3, but without making things needlessly convoluted just for the sake of immersion. Immersion is still rife though, whether it be the online lobby that reminds us of sports or leisure center halls with its high ceilings and distant thrumming bass notes, or Grizzco, which really does feel about as legitimate as we imagine Mr. Grizz's bookkeeping to be. No matter where you go in the world, you'll almost always be given the freedom to move around freely, unless doing so would make the experience lesser, such as the weapon and gear shops where, I mean, let's be honest, you're just gonna buy everything up as quickly as you can anyway. Wandering around on two limbs isn't going to improve that particular shopping spree. And because we can't gush enough about the improvements, the online lobby is just to die for. You can bring up a menu at any time to queue yourself up for one of the many online options available, but as soon as you've done so, you're once again free roaming around the lobby's interior with your equipment of choice. You can simply just stand there, as it won't be long before you find a game, or practice dealing death and swimming lengths just to keep your hands busy. We're sure nobody can deny that this is a lot better than just a list of names on the right-hand side of an otherwise practically static menu screen. All of this adds up to make Splatsville the biggest and most alive feeling of any of Splatoon's hub worlds. But if the illusion of reality isn't your thing, you can burrow yourself into the new in-game card game on offer, Table Turf Battle. In this deceptively simple yet dense side game, you'll be laying various shapes down to ink as much of the table's turf as possible, with each card offering a unique and wacky shape to work with. It's a surprisingly well thought out inclusion, and one that we feel that many other publishers would just choose to release as a standalone product. As it stands here though, it's a hugely enjoyable little freebie added into a game already bursting with content. There's more to do in this game than we possibly expected, and we haven't even mentioned the entirely superfluous custom locker system. Through a set of arguably clunky controls, you can stuff a load of things that you own in your locker to show them off to someone who might want to have a look. It's limited, it's time consuming, and it has no impact whatsoever on the rest of the game, but we can't deny that it's just fun to try and cram as much Splatoon related guff into our rectangular prison as possible. And we haven't even mentioned Salmon Run. Well, I mean, we did mention it, but we haven't mentioned it properly. Gone are the arbitrary time restrictions, meaning Grizzco is open 24/7, and in their place is the horrifying notion that after your third wave, you might come up against a colossal king salmonid. Waves feel tougher, but fairer at the same time with the introduction of your ability to throw eggs. And that might sound minor, but believe us, it is anything but. We've had to bust cartfuls of golden eggs from the beach to the high tide egg basket, throw bombs into the mouth of a giant enemy salmonid, as well as classics such as using cannons to keep hordes of cohocks at bay. It's certainly more Salmon Run, but it's more varied, more exciting, more rewarding, and more terrifying. But despite all of this, we can't help but feel that after 5 long years, fans deserve something more. The Table Turf Battle is a nice inclusion, but whereas Splatoon 2 got the excellent Salmon Run to make it truly stand out over Splatoon 1, Splatoon 3 struggles to boast anything as substantial. That does not take away from every one of the countless improvements featured, but it's still lacking that one big addition that is reasonable to expect after so many years since Splatoon 2's launch. In terms of visuals and performance, it's the same as the minutiae we mentioned prior. Small changes, but oh, so many of them. Ink looks glossier than ever and reflects light in a way that just makes us want to reach out and touch it. The inkling and octoling proportions have been lengthened slightly. Perhaps these inhabitants are collectively older, and if 59 frames per second isn't enough for you, we're pleased to say that just like all previous games, we could not shake its rock-solid 60 FPS. Loading times are also supremely fast, and when combined with a tighter lobby system, we were able to squeeze far more games into our hours of playing than we ever would have been able to in Splatoon 2. Nice. Splatoon 3 is more of the same, but refined to borderline mechanical perfection. It's the most fun we've had with an online shooter in years, and for series veterans, it makes Splatoon 2 feel entirely redundant for all but its unique single-player content, which still isn't as good. It feels like the development team have solved every single problem the Splatoon community has been bleating on about, and then fixed some more that we didn't even realize were problems until they were fixed. There's nothing revolutionary about it compared to its predecessors, and it's perhaps missing a big new idea that you might expect after 5 years, but Splatoon 3 is the pinnacle of the series and the pinnacle of shooters on Switch. You've reached the end of the review. It's time for Alex's personal thoughts, but I wrote it. All I can add is that I just absolutely love this game. I wouldn't say I'd fallen out of love with Splatoon 2, but it wasn't really grabbing me in the same way as before. And Splatoon 3 has dragged me right back in. Like, it really is. It's such an improvement in every regard. And I've got to be honest, it broke my heart to, you know, sort of say that, oh, it doesn't have that one big new idea. I just really wish they'd added some new idea in there, some big new idea. And I know there's tricolor turf wars, but that doesn't really cut it. Even though it doesn't have that quote-unquote big new idea, most of the worries that I had during the preview phase have just melted away. I mean, that is still a sticking point, but it's a very minor sticking point. The actual game itself is just so well refined. It is so gorgeous. And if you love Splatoon 2, and I would say if you put more than like 20 hours into it, I can highly recommend this. I think you're going to have an absolute blast with it. And if you put like 500 hours into Splatoon 2, which I know some of you have, well, you're going to buy this anyway. Because it's a good